Teachers can have a profound effect on a child's life, and honestly, my life is a total testimony of that. If you knew me as a kid, you probably would have thought that my life would be totally opposite of what it is now. My name is Elizabeth. I am a teacher. I'm a blogger and a YouTuber. I am a wife. We just celebrated our 10th anniversary. We have 2 beautiful boys, and if it wasn't for educators and the grace of God in my life, I would not be who I am today. So shortly after I was born, my mom relapsed and went back on drugs, and I was taken away from her. My brother was given to my grandmother, and I was 3 months old and put into foster care. Over a 3-year period, I was basically filtered through 5 different foster homes, and foster care has its positives and its negatives. It has people who are in the system who genuinely love and care for and nurture the children that are in their homes. However, it also has people who are just simply trying to collect a paycheck. And I don't need to go into too many graphic details to communicate that there are sometimes things that happen to children in those types of homes that just things that should never happen to children. Let's just say that things can be very ugly for children who are not wanted by the adults in their life. The last foster home I was in, though, was actually a very loving foster home. I still remember Mommy Tammy and Daddy Steve. They had 3 boys and desperately wanted a little girl. I was supposed to be their little girl. They were planning on adopting me, but my time with them was cut short when my biological father decided to adopt me. So my dad pulls up in this truck, and it's this old Wonder Bread truck or some kind of box truck that he had converted into a gutter truck. And I remember hopping in the truck and thinking, not really understanding what was happening. I knew that I was going to be moving with my dad, and I remember saying something like, I don't really want to do that. I want to stay in this home. Because really, for the first time, I felt loved and cared for by this family, and it was hard for me to say goodbye. I didn't understand. And I remember getting in the truck and just having anger and resentment in my heart and just really not even knowing what to say. And we got in the truck and drove a few hours from the eastern side of Indiana to Chicago, and we moved into this little dinky 1-bedroom apartment. I didn't even have a bed. My dad and I shared a bedroom, and I slept on the floor on a mattress, and my clothes were in a box in the corner, and all of a sudden my little world was flipped upside down. I no longer had a mom. Mommy Tammy wasn't there. I didn't talk to them or communicate with them, and I was living with this man that I really didn't know and didn't really bond with. I hadn't bonded with yet, and it was really difficult. It was a really hard time for me. I think I was around 4 or 5 when we got evicted from the apartment and moved in with my grandparents. I'm laughing because my grandparents had this really interesting relationship. And I guess I could share this story, but it really encompasses their relationship. My grandma, I guess, was doing the laundry one day and was taking the sheets off of my bed, changing the sheets, and noticed that I had this little journal tucked on the side of my bed, and she opened it up, and inside I had written, I love my grandma and grandpa, but my grandma calls my grandpa an SOB, and I had the acronym SOB written out, which of course I didn't know what that meant, but it just kind of gives you a glimpse into their relationship. My grandma was a Republican, my grandpa was a Democrat, and they fought pretty much like that. And so that situation was really tumultuous, and honestly, my dad really didn't like to be there. Because of the relationship that my dad had with his parents and the relationship that they had together, living in that house was really just not his ideal situation. And so really out of a desperate need to leave, he he was just trying to think of a way, I think, as I look back, to get out of there in a way that he could afford. And initially he went out to look for like a lot of land that we could go and camp on like every other weekend, just to get a break from grandma and grandpa. And he found this abandoned piece of land and built this, like, it was like a teepee shaped tent on it. He had found some tarp from an old lumber junkyard and he wrapped it around the teepee, the teepee poles, and built this structure on this piece of land. Initially, we were thinking of camping there every other weekend. Well, every other weekend turned to every weekend. And this next part may be hard for you to believe, but we literally moved into these teepees full time. So as a child, I go from living in a warm home with grandma and grandpa where there were, 3 meals a day. And even though they had their struggles and they may not have gotten along, there was still security and warmth and love there for me. To yet again, I'm ripped from that situation and isolated, with my dad in these teepees. And these were not like luxury teepees. These were teepees that we had no electricity. In the beginning, we had dirt floors and we had a campfire. As the months progressed, I remember going to the junkyard with him and getting our toilet from the junkyard. We would line it with a plastic bag. I remember getting a bathtub basin in the junkyard so that we could heat water up and pour it in the bathtub basin. And I remember one night coming home, we had sleeping bags because in Northwest Indiana is where this was all taking place. It gets cold in the winter. I mean, it's like snow, And I remember coming home one night and opening up my sleeping bag, and inside my sleeping bag was this like mouse, and she had all of her babies and made a nest inside my sleeping bag. My sleeping bag was just all ripped up. And I just remember as a kid having these moments of like, is this really my life? Like, is this really my life? I also remember the night that we hand drilled the red pitcher pump that we used. It was this red pump. I'm sure you've seen it, I remember taking turns with my dad. He had this, I don't even know what it was, device thing, and we took turns pounding down this pipe into the ground so that we could pump water to bathe in and to wash our clothes or our dishes or whatever. So we ate a lot of food that we could heat up over the fire. We had jugs of distilled water to make powdered milk so that we could have powdered milk with our cereal. This was like a really rustic experience. And my dad enrolled me in a school as we were living in the teepee. And so I was going to school this whole time. The property was kind of set back, so there was this gravel road that we went down, and nobody even knew for the first couple of years that I was in the teepee, living in the teepee with my dad. So at first we didn't have any running water or electricity. And I mean, I guess one of the benefits was that I learned a lot of STEM activities. I remember making kerosene lamps out of pickle jars. So any pickle jar that we were done with, we would drill a hole in the top and then pour kerosene inside and make little lamps. That was our light, and then the fire was our heat source. So the land that we were on, there were like these old junky cars on the land. And I remember one night taking a bath, and we had pumped the water from the pump and heated it up over the fire, poured it into the basin, and I'm sitting in this bathtub and I'm noticing that there's this like film at the top of the water, and come to find out it's like the oil from the cars that had seeped into the ground from the land that we were on. And so I really honestly didn't take baths very often, so I'm sure I smelled when I went to school. I'm sure my hair wasn't clean, and even the baths that I did take, I don't think I came out much cleaner than I did going in. So this wasn't like an extreme camping, luxury experience for me. This was life. And we moved into the teepees when I was in second grade, and we lived there for 6 years. We moved out when I was in 8th grade. I was in 8th grade when we moved into our first house, and by the time we got to that house, I had already been to 7 different schools. So I really had just huge gaps in my education. Not only that, but I lived with my single father who he was working to support us, and I didn't have a mom at home. So I was pretty much a turnkey kid. I mean, I went from friend to neighbor, and just for days and days would just be at other people's houses, kind of came and went as I pleased, and didn't have a lot of support from the adults in my life. When I was 12, my dad and I mutually decided that I should meet my mom, my biological mom. And so before I flew from Chicago to California, because that's where she was at the time, he and I sat down, and he basically told me that he had given my mother abortion money when he found out that she was pregnant with me. When I flew from Chicago to California, my mom and I had a really good experience. There was one evening though where she sat down with me, and she basically explained that she had received abortion money, but she had taken that money and used it to get high on drugs. And initially, what she told me was that she was thinking that those drugs would burn me out of her body. It truly is just even a miracle that I was even born. So from 8th grade to 10th grade, I moved schools 3 more times. And during that time period, those 2 or 3 years, my dad started dating other women, and he had several short-term relationships during those few years. So I think between having, teenage hormones, moving schools, and really not having friends, because I'm constantly trying to make new friends at my new school, and then just having this lack of adult support. I didn't know if women were going to be coming or going or staying or supporting, or I think all of that combined really wrecked me. I mean, honestly, for the first time in my life, I had considered ending my life. It wasn't until I was a junior in high school at a new school that my story really takes a turn for the better. So through a crazy series of events, I end up moving out of my dad's house in the Chicago area and relocating to California. That entire story is a story in itself, but I'm a firm believer that everything happens for a reason. And really, as I look back on that time, I think that I had to be removed from that situation so that I could meet her. Yes, her. There is an educator that I met when I was a junior in high school who literally changed my life. So I'm at this new school my junior year, and I'm at this assembly gathering, and this woman walks across the platform and begins to share her story. And I remember thinking, as I'm looking at her, there's no way that it's even possible that you've come from what you've come from and you are who you are. And really, for the first time in my life, I felt like there was hope for me. And looking at her thinking, how do I be like you? How do I get to where you're at in life? The woman who was speaking at the assembly was actually the administrator of the school that I was attending. And she also taught a sign language electives class that I just so happened to be enrolled in. And little did I know the impact that she would have on my life, an impact that would literally change the course of my life. Pretty much from the get-go, I knew that she was different. She really stood out. She cared about people differently than I had ever seen before. She was loving, and she loved her students, and I just really admired that about her. And so as I was attending the school, going to her classes, she and I really started developing kind of this mentor-mentoree relationship. And she really started to help me see that my dysfunction and my deficiencies, the fact that I didn't have a mom, or, that I came from all of the stuff that I came from as a young person, none of that really defined my future. And she started kind of walking me through the steps that I needed to take to be different. I remember her telling me one time, she said, "Elizabeth, We do not determine our destiny. We make choices, and those choices determine our destiny. And really, for the first time, I felt like that was bite-sized enough, something that I could do, choices that I could make on a daily basis that would help me, in the end, change my destiny. I didn't have to be like those before me. I could be different. And so really from that moment, there was just this snowball effect that really kind of thrusted me forward into this lifestyle and mindset that I could be different than those of my past. If it weren't for her example, her tough love, I mean, honestly, I was hard to love at times, and truly the hope that she gave me from her own personal story, I would not be who I am today. That's why I became a teacher. I became a teacher because of her. She helped me see that any child from any background with any type of dysfunction could come out of it and not only make it, but succeed and be a contributor to society and do the same for others. And that's why I do what I do. That's why I'm in education. That's why I'm a teacher. And there's this whole kind of pay it forward mentality that I have, because if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be who I am today. And I hope that I can have that same impact on the children who are in my classroom. If you're watching this and you're an educator, a teacher, an administrator, a school counselor, and you feel like maybe you're not making a difference, or maybe you feel like the students in your class are a lost cause. I'm just saying, if you would have seen me as a kid, you'd have thought I was a lost cause. Please look me in the eyes and hear me when I say that you matter. What you do matters. You have dozens of opportunities sitting in your classroom. I was Mrs. Annette's opportunity. And my life, my kids' lives, my students' lives, and future generations' lives were changed because of what she did for me.